The next person who was also going to speak was Bruce Moore. Now, I said to Bruce that I'd read a telegram. Now, Bruce is not very well and he didn't really understand what I meant by telegram. And I hoped the telegram would be something like help, stop, bother, stop, stop, stop. Which I thought was a good telegram because he's not well, and I thought that sort of summed it up. But he wrote me a letter and he said he wanted me to read it out. So it's not that long, but it isn't quite as short as what I thought it was going to be. So, and I said I'd give him a videotape, so I can't even get out of it. So I've got to read this out to you from Bruce. So I've read it once, so I'll read it hopefully with charm and affection. Trampers and climbers know full well the meaning and feeling that these two words convey to us. The joy of being on top of Flagstaff, Silver Peak and Tyndall, my first three peaks, or the disappointment of again climbing into a wet, soggy sleeping bag, or turning back just short of a summit, or the grief of losing a friend in the hills. For me, tonight is one of my big disappointments. For the last 2 years, I've looked forward to the joy of meeting once again friends I've made through the Otago Tramping and Mountaineering Club since I joined in 1953. But now I have to apologise for being absent due to health problems. The club for me has been one of the most important events in my life. It has helped me to become successful in life, found me the most wonderful wife and provided the most wonderful lifelong friends. I owe so much to this amazing club. My friends may say, thank goodness he is not speaking tonight. At least this is a briefer way of doing it, guys. Because I don't think he would be this brief if he's here. But has had to write a short note, he's got that underlined. Yeah, short note instead. I didn't say short note, I said telegram. Anyway. May you all have a wonderful weekend full of memories. Thank you. Long live the club, Bruce Moore. So.
And I joined the Tramping Club at about the age of 15, 16 in probably late 1948. And I was certainly tramping with the club during 1949. So the first trips that I went with the Otago Tramping Club would have been day trips to the Silver Peaks. I lived over in Mornington in Durham Street, and to get to Nairn Street I simply walked because there were no buses on a Sunday. If we were meeting at Duke Street, it was an even longer walk. It was about an hour of walking on pavements at the beginning and end of the trip, from Nairn Street up to Ben Rudd's, and then possibly down into Warri Flat, and simply back up home at what is now the Bullring. This was the ice axe my parents bought for me, of course, when I was about 16, 17, and felt that it was absolutely essential to have for just even ordinary tramping. I had it when we went up Mount Clark. I can remember arresting in the snow as we slid down off Mount Clark. Pack, I would have bought I hadn't got the straps right. It was a horrible thing to wear, in that most of the force, most of the weight was on your kidneys. The first weekend trip that I was with Dick Hamill at St Mary's Range, afterwards, when John and I were talking about it, he said that he had decided not to go on that trip, though his father had asked him to go, but also said that there was a prefect from Otago Girls High School coming. That put John off. The extent of the trips we did are not much further than, say, the Chalkies or High Top, Double Hill. Towards the end of 1949, Dick Hamill asked if I'd like to go on a trip up the Dart with him and 3 or 4 other older people and his son John. He asked my mother to come in and see him at his law office, and she highly approved. I was to get to Queenstown by bus, and nobody met the bus. I simply walked up to the house and went and knocked on the back door, and he said, oh yes, you're with us, oh, and then went and told his wife, told Nana, that we had an extra guest for tea to sleep the night. We had tea, and he then told John to take me round Queenstown. That was the first time I met John. John took me on a tiki tour around Queenstown, and we started a conversation which did not cease till he died.
I had the theory that once you'd seen somebody out on a tramping trip, you'd seen them after a very bad day, and they had a 3-inch stubble, and they were all a bit cross and grumpy from being wet the night before. Marriage couldn't bring any surprises. Very few club members had cars, So the usual form of transport, or the quite common form of transport, was for us to meet in the club rooms on Friday night, which was our club night, and we'd get a taxi about 10 o'clock at night after the club meeting up to Burnsaddle or out to Warrieflat, and then we'd start tramping. And that was one of the reasons why Green Hut was so useful, because you'd tramp for about 3 hours in the dark, and if you didn't get lost by falling in a swamp somewhere or on somebody's shortcut across to Sleepy Hollow, which happened a few times, then you were at Green Hut that night and you were in a good position to go off and do further wandering into the Silver Peaks area. In those days, Green Hut had a 3-tier bunk, and my first time I went in there, the top tier was called the bridal chamber. The middle tier was sort of for the general public, and the bottom tier tended to be for people with dogs. Other forms of transport we took was rail car up to Hindon, and it was a good way to go into Pyramid Hut later on. I can remember going at one time carrying a load of bricks up there to build the chimney. Quite hard carrying bricks up those hills. Another form of transport we often used was the coastal train that came from Evansdale. And about halfway down the Evansdale Glen, as we called it in those days, you'd hear the train whistle in the distance, and you'd think, how much time have we got to get there? So we sort of started running, and it took us an awful long way down to that railway station. The people that I knew in my generation who got married were Mary and Gordon, Ron and Sarah, Liz and Bruce, and lots of others. One trip we went snow caving up the Kekanuis. We all got rather car sick in the back of this bus. My husband, Bruce, was sick in the snow cave. It's not a good experience, especially when you're sick inside your boots.
We were somewhat anxious as to whether or not the Earnslaw was on or the Ben Lomond, and we got down there as early as possible, because if the Ben Lomond was going up the lake, it being small, it only took so many, but fortunately it was the Earnslaw, and we got up there very tidily. We arrived at Glenorchy. There was a rough charabanc, and we got out at Paradise, then set off walking from that road end, got to Chinaman's Bluff at the end of that day, and that day was Christmas Eve, of course. Dick Hamill was not going to spend her Christmas Day at home. We slept at Chinaman's Bluff, and then we had to climb over Chinaman's Bluff because the river was too close in under the bluff, and up the dredge flats to Dredge Hut. It was a very rough trek through the bush. The following day it was hailing, and we set off from Dredge Hut, but halfway up the dredge flats, one of the Nancys was saying that she was too ill to go on. Mervyn Rogers, his feet were badly blistered because he decided to try tramping without socks. So Dick Hamill decided we would really have to turn round. He had arranged for the airdrop of food at the Dart Huts. He wouldn't be able to stop it. There was no cell phones in those days, and in fact we saw the plane go over, and we tried writing a message in the sand on the edge of the river, which the Popeye Lucas, of course, did not see. And so we retreated to Dredge Hut. The airdrop happened. There was no parachute. Packs apparently burst all over the place, and the people who were at Dredge Hut and knew it was coming were very disappointed that the Christmas cake burst into crumbs and could not be gathered up. Again, we had to climb over the bluff, which was a very slow process, and Dick Hamill was not too healthy himself.
The club bought a Morris commercial, which we called the Morris Comical, and it cost us £130. If you drove it over 40 miles an hour, it would blow something. And you would have to run the windscreen wipers to keep the radiator water from the windscreen. We used to have mattresses in the back. The president, one Friday night, that was their meeting night, proclaimed, "What the club needs is more sex." The Red Boys thought this was a good idea. What he actually meant was more sex to cover the mattresses in the truck. I was driving the truck up the Reese one weekend and drove over the Muddy Creek Bridge. When we started to cross, it had 3 main bearers. Halfway over, it only had 1.5, and dropped the truck on its side into the river. There were howls of complaint from the back. This delayed the trip about half a day, as we had to demolish the rest of the bridge, dig out the approach, and pull the vehicle back on its wheels before continuing. And Don Patterson, about 10 of us used to huddle in his tent to listen to another chapter of Moby Dick. Unfortunately, the trip ended before the book, and I still don't know how it finished. The chief guide asked if I wanted to climb mountains. I said, too high, too hard, too dangerous. Jerry said, you don't climb a mountain, you just take a step. Once you've taken that step, you then take the next step, and then the next step. He wasn't so good on the overall picture, but he was good on steps.
I well remember an ancient aunt who, when told that I had joined the Tramping Club, she asked, "And where do you sleep?" When informed that it was often in tents, she said she certainly hoped that they were segregated. And I was asked by another personable young man to accompany him to the Alpine Club dinner. My mother went into a flat spin and said I must go out and find something decent to wear. She gave up totally when I came home with a lovely and very expensive pair of skis. Then there was search and rescue. At one practice at Buckland's Crossing, I was asked at the end by a nosy reporter whether sex was a problem on the job. When I thought about it later, I realised that on that particular exercise I was the only female present. It never occurred to me to find that a problem. One memorable search and rescue exercise that got me into trouble was at Homer one weekend. At lunchtime on the Saturday, there was a fair bit of cheek being tossed around. A certain Dallas Knox remarked that the woman he married would have to be loaded with money and cook as well as his mother. My big mouth made me say, "Right, I'll come and see you when I win the lottery." Back came his reply, "You'll have to pass the cooking test first." And my response, "That's nothing to the test you'll have to pass." Suffice to say, we both passed the test. I managed to avoid the matrimonial aspect of the club for quite a few years, until once on a ski trip to Fox Peak, Dallas cornered me in the back of Roger and Helen Conroy's V-Dub. Not much room when there were two packs there as well. Perhaps we should have stacked them between us. Dallas had some rather pithy sayings, one of which was that the Tramping Club was really a brothel under canvas. One particular weekend he was heading for Homer to meet one Royden Thompson. He was working, so as was normal, I packed his gear for him the night before and had it all ready for him. It happened that we both wore the same size climbing boots, and he never would believe that I didn't deliberately pack two left ones. Darkness had fallen, and we were warmly ensconced in our sleeping bags in the rock bivvy on Car Saddle. It was positively teeming outside, and sleepiness was creeping on. There came a plaintive voice from the Kennedy corner. "I don't know whether to go now or stick it out for the night." Foster told him he should hold on.
Land Rovers were favoured by some members for transport to the hills as well. Two that I remember especially were Dick Razier's, which had concrete splashed all over the dashboard from where he used to back it up to the ready mix chute. And Graham Buchanan's was even more amazing, because he had bits of paper wedged all around this jolly thing, because he was mainly trying to silence the rattles. He was obsessed by rattles, and heaven knows why he ever had a Land Rover, a travelling collection of rattles.
But something like sort of 35 trips in a year and things. Almost every weekend, our own trips in the Silver Peaks and club trips and things. One thing we developed in that time was a philosophy, I suppose. First school holidays, we went away in the Silver Peaks for a week. Took mountains of food. We wouldn't start tramping till about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Go like hell for 3 hours to the next spot. The next morning we'd just lounge around, get up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So it was maximum effort for a short period of time and as much fun and leisure. Just three of us in the Silver Peaks for a week. Right. And we called that a Silver Peaks expedition because, you know, there's big expeditions to go overseas. We thought, why can't we have them in the Silver Peaks? We had one to the Rootburn track where we took us 7 days to walk the Rootburn track. We were so slack.
Young men as we were, we had an eye for the young ladies who were around and would wonder whether we'd have a chance of meeting up with somebody. But you see, there's a lot more guys on trips then. There's about 3 or 4 guys, and if there's one young lady in the party, well, that'd be great. Trying to get to know who that person was and what they were like. With modern transport and roads, Glenorchy, for example, been sealed and get into the mountains a lot quicker now. Dave was a real character. He was a really fit guy, and Dave was so fit that if he was going up a hill, he would go at the same speed he went on the flat, which was fast. He'd just bend over a little bit more, He's also into saving weight, and so he sharpened the side of his spoon, so he didn't need to carry a knife as well. If you borrowed Dave's spoon, you need to be aware of the sharp edge. So.
I'm David Barnes, and I joined the Tramping Club in 1981. Climbers have always referred to the club as the Tramping Club because the tramping's been the constant. In the 60s, there would be people climbing Mount Cook. So the mountaineering waxes and wanes, and I particularly talk about the early 80s because I suppose that was my generation. There would be a basic snowcraft course or an alpine tramping course to learn how to use ice axe and crampons. But the next few club trips would tend to provide opportunities for people to go and use and build on those skills. The next club trip, a fortnight later, was to Mount Cook National Park. So some of the guys who got a bit enthused about it went off up the Copeland Pass. Low-level mountaineering, and the next thing you know, a year or so later, they're all off. Some of them are climbing the southwest ridge of Aspiring. And climbing trips don't fit in with club trips as well because they are a lot more condition dependent, and you also need to have people who are suited to the route. So you can't just sign up and see how it goes, which with a lot of tramping you can. Rock climbing went to some extent hand in hand with the mountaineering. 4 or 5 times over the last 30 years has been a burst of enthusiasm where like Tuesday night rock climbing will come and go. Cycling trips came and went. First weekend cycling trip, they went to Waynestown, which is just past Dunback. In the last few years, Otago Central Rail Trail has been done at Labour Weekend every 2 or 3 years, and that's always popular. Then there was sea kayaking for a while, and Bruce Newton, the main enthusiast for that. A couple of experienced people and a whole lot of complete novices, and off we'd go, and Hope Arm Hut on Lake Manapori were popular.
Did a lot of tramping in my early days in New Zealand because I'd come from the UK where tramping isn't quite the same. I was due to go back to the UK in 1990, and in the year 89 to 90 trip I did every one but 4 of the trips on the trip card because I was never going to return to New Zealand and I wanted to see the lot. One of those trips was wanting to go to the Copeland Pass, and Dougie Forrester, who was a fantastic leader, offered to train Pam and myself and also invited Arthur Blondell along. And what went then was history. March 17, we crossed the pass and ended up in Welcome Flat. 2 years later, Arthur and I were married. So hence I'm back in New Zealand. For Arthur, the challenge was to go high, further, faster, sooner, more challenging and off track. For me, the challenge, because I have a very busy, people-intense job, the challenge was to get out and recharge my batteries. John, who's 80 years old, who was my favourite tramping companion, because he and I would inevitably choose the same pond to swim in, the same little bit of grass to snooze in, the same slightly low pass to go over, without having to climb the mountain or get there faster. The challenge for me wasn't going further or faster, it was doing things differently to the maximum enjoyment of the group.
Currently we have 207 members in the club. We do day trips every Sunday, weekend trips every second weekend. Some things are still the same though. The hills are still steep, there's still bloody sandflies out there, the packs are still heavy. You know, we got all this lightweight stuff, but you still fill your pack up. There's still the great company, great bunch of like-minded people that you're out there tramping with. Otago Tramping and Mountaineering Club has been referred to the Otago Tramping and Matrimonial Club. There's still couples being formed today. In the club constitution, objects 3, number G, to encourage social intercourse between members. I joined the club when I was 37 and I'm actually probably one of the younger ones in the club. I joined after my kids got a little older, mortgage was under control, I'd done my OE overseas. My dad was in the tramping club before him, his mother, so I'm 3rd generation. So if my kids join, they'll be 4th generation. A huge factor in me becoming involved in the club is having a supportive partner. I've sometimes heard them being referred to as a tramping widow. For me to bugger off and go off into the hills and leave my wife with the kids, I just can't stress how important that is to me.
My girlfriend is expecting me for tea. My girlfriend is expecting me for tea. My girlfriend is expecting, my girlfriend is expecting, my girlfriend is expecting me for tea. Singing I will if you will, so will I. Singing I will if you will, so will I. Singing I will if you will, singing I will if you will, singing I will with you, and so will I. She has a lovely bust of pearl and shore. She has a lovely bust of pearl and shore. She has a lovely bust, she has a lovely bust, she has a lovely bust of pearl and shore. Singing I will if you will, so will I. Singing I will if you will, so will I. Singing I will if you will, singing I will if you will, singing I will if you will, so will I.
Well done.
In the 50s, your radio stopped at around Milton. You had to make your own blooming entertainment. The songs came out. They kept you awake in the flipping vans if you were travelling up in the middle to nowhere. To get from here to Queenstown and like this, how do you keep awake in the night? You're all singing away and catching up with those. And you've seen all these songbooks. And they would, when you've got out and you've got yourself in the campsites and things like this, the songbooks would come out and they'd start singing. But there were some brilliant songs sung.
Oh, sir! Oh, sir! Oh, sir! As she lay between the lily washings and nothing on at all, she was a very naughty lady. She was a very naughty lady. She was a very naughty lady. And she lay between the lily washings and nothing on at all. Oh! 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 As she lay between the lovely white cheeks with nothing on at all.
I just wanted to get on and on. Of course, when you're driving for about 6 hours, this actually is quite short.